Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Sofa. I'm Emily, and joining me tonight is Kalyn.
Hi, I'm Kalyn, joining you from New York City, though it is certainly not evening for me.
No, no, of course. So,
But
coming
good
up next,
evening to everyone else.
oh, there you go, exactly. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So, coming up next week is a major American holiday, Thanksgiving, and today Kalyn's going to tell us a bit more about Thanksgiving. Um, I was obviously out with you, Kalyn, last week in New York for our pop up store, so we had a lot of discussion about it there in person.
Yeah.
And with our new store opening in Albany, I'm going to be moving to the States, so I feel like it's important you tell me all about the celebration for future years. So,
For
can you
sure.
start by telling us a bit of history behind Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so the origins of American Thanksgiving date back to 1621 when the Pilgrims, or English settlers who had traveled to North America on the Mayflower to establish Plymouth Colony, known today as Plymouth in Massachusetts, celebrated their first harvest in the New World. So, this is a holiday that has been celebrated in some form since the very beginning of the English arriving in America. But it was actually President Abraham Lincoln who first declared a national day of Thanksgiving on the last Thursday in November. And shortly after, it became a federal holiday.
Oh, well, there you go. So, is it always the last Thursday in November then?
Well, from Abraham Lincoln on, each president sort of had their own input about when it would be. It's not something that was dictated by a specific event on a specific day. So there was room for change based on personal preference. But in 1942, a new act of Congress decided that the fourth Thursday in November would always be the set date of the holiday, and this was no longer at the discretion of the president. So that's why we have Thanksgiving on the fourth Sunday, which is, or fourth Thursday, which is next Thursday.
There you go. Yeah, because I know that a few of the presidents had caused some controversy, hadn't they, by
Yeah,
choosing.
I think it was probably just because they were like, you know what, I'm just in the mood for like some Thanksgiving turkey now. So let's just do it on let's just have it on this Thursday. Um
Yeah,
Very confusing though.
yeah, but at least it's a bit more set in stone now. So,
Yeah.
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 And from what I know, and I don't know a whole lot about Thanksgiving, some of my reference points come from friends, as we've discussed in the past. But yeah, like I say, a lot of what I've heard is about the food. So, what sort of food do you and your family have at Thanksgiving?
So most of what we have, I'd say, is pretty traditional. We of course have a turkey, and I actually made my own Thanksgiving turkey for the first time 2 years ago for a Friendsgiving that I had. It's kind of like this rite of passage. It's like something you see your dad do every year, but you don't actually know how to cook a turkey yourself. But we did it, and I did it last year as well, not being able to go home to Pennsylvania to see my family because of COVID. So that's crossed off the list now. I'm like a turkey expert.
Hmm.
Um, so you have the turkey, and then you need to have some stuffing. And there's always what's called in the bird stuffing, which is cooked inside the turkey. And then there's out of the bird stuffing that's just cooked, baked or something on the stove. One of the two. I think for me, the out of the bird stuffing is a little bit dry, so it's not my favorite. I normally go for the in the bird stuffing. Turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, probably a green bean casserole of some sort. And there's always cranberry sauce, which I don't usually take that, except for maybe with turkey sandwiches as leftovers, but I never really know what to do with it on the table, but it's always there. Um, Something that my family has that I think is sort of out of the ordinary is mashed turnips. And
Yeah.
so like that's like I've had that with haggis at burn suppers before. And what's interesting is that in the US, what you call turnips here are like that same vegetable is called a rutabaga. But my family calls it turnips. So one year when I was having a Friendsgiving and I really wanted to make mashed turnips because it's like my favorite, I go to the store and buy turnips, but it's like a radish. And so that didn't turn out well. But yeah, that's how I learned that my family uses the Scottish word for that vegetable for some reason. Um, so that's I would say that's the bulk of the dinner, and then for dessert we'll usually have apple pie, pumpkin pie, pecan pie, probably some ice cream. I don't really think there's anything else besides pie for dessert. But that's, 3 pies is a
Yeah.
lot
Plenty
anyway.
choice.
It's a lot of food and there's always tons of leftovers, and it's kind of customary that you don't really eat the turkey the way that you eat it at the table again. Maybe some people do, but really everyone gets like really obsessed with like eating turkey sandwiches for the
Yeah.
next couple
Yeah.
days. So that's the food. It's a lot of
Yeah.
food.
I was gonna say, I think I don't know what you then have for Christmas dinner, but that actually sounds very similar to what a Scottish Christmas dinner would be.
Yeah,
Maybe for the green bean casserole, that's something
yeah.
we wouldn't really have. But yeah,
I think Christmas dinner, I think, is a little more up to like each individual family, whereas the Thanksgiving meal here, I think, is very probably just because we've seen it so much in like
hmm,
movies and books, and it's like, stories about the pilgrims and stuff, and they all have the same food. But yeah, Christmas is different. I think we have like steak and
yeah.
like crab cakes and stuff, like
Interesting.
very, yeah. But Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving, and you can't really mess with
Oh,
it.
and when you're saying about the leftovers, so yeah, likewise, people here will have their turkey for Christmas Day, and then their Boxing Day sandwiches. So Boxing Day, day
Oh,
after
Boxing Day
Christmas.
sandwiches, yeah.
Yeah. Or also sometimes people will make a curry from it because
Oh,
here in
really?
the UK curries are huge.
Yeah.
And there's one of our favourite crisp brands, Mackey's, who make haggis flavoured crisps, which I'm sure you got to try. We sent you some, didn't we?
Yeah. Hmm.
So they've just brought out a brand new flavour, which is called Boxing Day curry flavour. So it's
That's
yeah,
so
it's like an
interesting.
unofficial thing. Like you say, it's what you do then with the leftovers from
Yeah.
that dinner. So yeah, well, so I'll look forward to coming out and trying my own Thanksgiving meal next year. So
Yeah.
whether I'll start out trying to make turkey or anything like that, I don't think so. I'll maybe let someone for me to begin with and go from there. They can keep me right.
The key is to just taking everything out of the oven and making the most space possible.
Yes,
So,
yeah, a lot of
yeah.
timing there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, and then another thing again that I am aware of primarily from friends is the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. So I know that they all sit around and watch that. So being in
Yeah.
New York, have you ever been to the parade yourself, or are you usually back home and watching it on TV?
I haven't been to the parade. I will say they start setting up the barricades for the parade like a while in advance. I remember when I used to live in an area where the parade ends up passing through, seeing barricades just like weeks beforehand and thinking that that was kind of crazy. That was my first kind of bit of like seeing the Macy's, seeing any part of it in person. I've never actually seen it going on in person, but I've definitely seen the iconic turkey over the Macy's building and sort of setting up. So I it's definitely like an iconic American thing to do. Everyone watches it. It's like one of my favorite parts of the holiday season. There's actually a lot of Christmas, like the ending of the parade is always Santa
Right.
in the
Okay.
sleigh. So it's kind of it's really sort of kicking off the holiday season. It's not really so much about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But I love waking up in the morning to watch it. You're like still in your PJs and it's very cozy. Now as an adult, I'm often traveling in the morning to go to Pennsylvania to see my family. So I normally don't actually get to see it unless I like stream it on my phone or something. I definitely don't get to like stay cozy in my PJs watching it. But what's cool about being in New York is that if you're traveling on Thanksgiving, you probably have to go to Penn Station, which is right by Macy's. So I do sort of get to see it being set up and things in the morning. So that's cool. But yeah, I haven't actually seen it in person. I've heard that it's a little crazy trying to get a spot, and people kind of get up very early in the morning to try and go get a good spot to see it. So I think someday I probably will, but
Oh, well,
not
my
yet.
parents managed to make it. They were out visiting Boston 2 years ago. So yeah, they got the train from Boston very early in the morning, came through to New York to see the parade, and then go shopping in Macy's after. So I know they enjoyed it. So next year I'll
Did they
maybe
have a
try
good
and
did they have a good view?
I think so. They didn't tell me that they struggled, so I'm taking it for granted that they did. But
Okay.
yeah, well, they seem to enjoy it. So yeah, like I say, next year I'll need to go and see it, or at least
Yeah.
get to watch it, because they don't show
Yeah.
it over here on TV. So
Yeah.
it'd be cool if they did.
Well,
Yeah.
then one of the really good parts about it is that right after the dog show comes on. So
Okay.
that's like you kind of like just leave the TV on then, and then you
Yeah.
actually another new tradition in my family, though, since we've all gotten into the Great British Baking Show, or Bake Off as you guys call it, is that we
Yeah.
kind of after the dog show we've started to put that on.
Okay.
But just because like we're cooking and it's like, they're
Yeah.
cooking and it's like um new traditions being created all the time.
Oh, definitely. And then I know that like football is a big thing on Thanksgiving as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. After the meal though, like
Okay.
that's kind of an afternoon thing, I think.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you can't tell, I'm not a big football person, so that's like not my priority.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely football is going to be on just all day as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. I wonder if the players get. Do you think they have to save their turkey dinner till after they've played then?
I would think so because turkey's supposed to make you really tired. Like I think that's why we all want like a nap after the
Yeah.
meal. So that wouldn't be that good for them.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Well, and so obviously, as we said, a lot of the kind of celebration is around the dinner table, the TV. So when you're thinking of that, and how do you decorate, and would you be able to introduce tartans? So if you're a Scottish American, how could you combine your Scottish and American heritage?
Um, so we decorate for fall here. Like it's a really big something that we start doing at the end of September, and it's kind of like we get really excited about decorating for fall, which is kind of that ends up like we don't really separate Thanksgiving decorations from fall decorations. So
Yeah,
I think that we really love to create a nice table. So I think, a tartan table runner, any kind of other table linens. Like we love a good dressed up table for Thanksgiving just as much as for Christmas. So I think that's a great way to incorporate tartan in the decorations. Even a tartan wreath would be fitting. Also, I mean, like I'm probably gonna wear my serape here that I have for Thanksgiving because it's really cozy. I think, wearing any kind of tartan as well is a great way to incorporate your Scottish American heritage into your
definitely.
Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, well, and I think,
Yeah.
like you say, because you decorate for fall and that's tied in, then instantly when I think of it, I think of those kind of autumnal colours, and So I think weather tartans, like the Fraser hunting
Like
weathered
that I
you've
have
got,
here, yeah. Yeah.
I aren't they?
It's
The kind of
very,
orange browns, yeah.
yeah. No, this is probably like one of the most autumnal looking things that I have. So certainly, yeah.
Perfect. There you go. You don't have to worry about your outfit. You're good to go.
I'm definitely good to go. And this is so big and cozy that it's like it doesn't even matter
Yeah.
what kind of sweater I have on. It's perfect.
Oh. Well, and so then, as a family, do you have any other traditions that I might not already have been aware of, or specific to you?
Yeah, well, I like I was saying before, we get sort of all of America, I think, gets really into the idea of fall time. But then, of course, we also get really into the idea of Christmas time. And Thanksgiving is kind of like that breaking point. Like, if you're listening to Christmas music or you're like decorating for Christmas before Thanksgiving, people are going to look at you like, all right, like, what are you doing? But
Yeah.
after Thanksgiving, it's like you're totally cool to like go full on Christmas. So my family, we've had this tradition for many, many years, but on the night of Thanksgiving, we actually watch the movie Elf. And
It's
it's
one of my
like so it's, we Thanksgiving is like the last time to celebrate fall, and then it's immediately on to Christmas. So my family kind of just takes that to an extreme. We don't even wait until the next day. It's like the night of, we're watching Elf, and now we forget about fall, and now it's Christmas and it's winter. So
yeah.
I guess that's kind of maybe the only other tradition that is maybe specific to my family. But it's one of my favorite ones because I love that movie and I love Christmas.
Yeah, I think it's a great celebration. And I mean, we as a family would also watch Elf every year, but we don't have that specific date that we would watch it on. So
Yeah. Well,
it's
it's also, it's the only time that we're really all together again
yeah,
before Christmas. So,
yeah,
yeah.
sounds good. And then one thing I remember learning from our mutual friend Lorraine Bell, who's chief of New York Caledonian Club, and you're also on the board of the Caledonian Club, um,
Yes.
is that in Canada, Thanksgiving takes place a bit earlier than in the States. And so I think part of the reason is because it gets cooler in Canada and they celebrate more the end of harvest opposed to kind of the same reason with the British coming over, like you say, on the Mayflower. So do you know anything about the difference between Canadian and American traditions and Thanksgiving then?
I don't know a ton about it. I think that there's probably a similar, if you are having a dinner, I would assume that the food is probably similar. I think it makes a lot of sense, like, what, because there's, when you think about Thanksgiving, there's the sort of family kind of aspect that we think of, but then the other thing that we think of is this, like, there's a lot of like harvest imagery with it. So it actually makes sense that, well, the Canadians are actually maybe sort of doing it more correctly than us and like putting like there's a real reason as to when it is, other than just like the president decided that it was going to be the last Thursday of the month. So it seems that that tradition is sort of maybe more in line with a lot more like older traditions having to do with the land
Yeah,
and stuff. So
yeah, I
that's
think
maybe where I would see that it's different.
yeah, sort of their celebration of the food that they've been able to grow throughout the year and that
Right.
kind of feast,
Where it's
isn't it?
kind of like we took those traditions as well, but we didn't really necessarily place um
Same
that
emphasis.
same kind of emphasis on it. We kind of just, as we do in America. Um
Yeah.
but
Well, it's just interesting because I know that there even other countries do celebrate Thanksgiving, but America's the one by far here in Scotland we would know most about. So
because there's so much just like iconic imagery. associated with it. But what's interesting, like in looking at the Canadian version, is that if you think about the word Thanksgiving, actually what maybe some of these other countries do is probably more in line with what that is, like giving thanks for the food that they were able to grow, as opposed to just well, I suppose we give thanks for being with our families and stuff, but it's just cool to hear about, because I didn't really know that much about. I actually only recently learned that there even was a Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool. And I can,
Yeah.
it's, you know, as a historian, I like to learn about where some of these events even came from to begin with. So it's
exactly.
cool.
Well, it's always nice to know the backstory, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's great for Lorraine because she gets to celebrate Canadian
she
Thanksgiving and American Thanksgiving. So
definitely. That's a good way to have it. A celebration every month. So
yeah. So Emily, you have family in Canada.
yes.
I remember you saying. So then do you know anything about your family's Canadian traditions?
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of what they would eat, again, it's a lot of the turkey and probably quite a similar meal because, well, obviously the countries are right next door to each other, so there will be a lot of crossover there in terms of kind of supermarkets and brands and everything that you probably can get similar access to the same things. But I think where you guys would have your pumpkin pies, I think they do that. But I know in Ontario, where my cousins are, butter tarts are a big thing. So I think for their pudding, then that's kind of where I've heard that there's a bit of a difference. But yeah, I think in a similar way, although the date is different that they celebrate, like you say, it's just that celebration to come together as a family, isn't it? And like you say, get to see everyone before you get into kind of the real holiday Christmas celebrations.
Yeah.
So bit earlier and more separated out. But yeah, I think, like you say, all about family and enjoying that food together.
For sure. So Thanksgiving isn't the only holiday that we have in November, at least
Oh,
for us Scots and Scottish Americans. So St. Andrew's Day, the day celebrating Scotland's patron saint, falls on November 30th, just a few days after American Thanksgiving. So I've been to a few St. Andrew's dinners here in the States, but I was hoping that you could tell me why we celebrate St. Andrew.
yeah, of course. Yeah, so our patron saint here in Scotland. So St Andrew is pivotal in shaping Scottish societies, well, society and the societies of many other countries across the globe. He was known for his generosity and kindness. He believed that, reflected in the warm and generous nature of Scotland and our people here. So I think that's why it's celebrated and remembered so fondly. Um, and like you say, it's nice to have a wee extra celebration before Christmas. So yeah, why not?
So can you tell us more about who St. Andrew was
Yeah,
besides the patron saint of Scotland?
yeah. So Andrew lived in the first century, and he was actually a fisherman before he became one of Jesus's disciples. So he became renowned for his Christian preaching, and like Jesus, he was crucified and then represented by the cross on his flag. So our national flag here is known as the Saltire, but its more official name is the St Andrew's Cross. So that's where our flag comes from, St Andrew too. So for all that you might not have known about who St Andrew was, you've probably seen the flag and unconsciously known St Andrew. So yeah, and so the town of St Andrews in Scotland is where it's said that the relics of St Andrew were brought by divine guidance from Constantinople. And a Greek monk had a vision in which he was told to take the relics to the ends of the earth for safekeeping. And his journeys took him to the shores of Fife, where St Andrews now stands. So like I say, I'm originally from Fife, and it's quite a large region, so it's the other end of the region from where I was born in Dunfermline. But St Andrews is a beautiful town. So, like I said, right on the water. You've got the ruins of the abbey there. St Andrews University is also very well known.
Yeah, it's
The
a
old
beautiful
court.
university.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there's a lot of history in St Andrews itself, and then obviously it takes its name from our patron saint. So definitely a must on your places to visit when you come over, Kalyn.
yeah, I'm excited.
And so St Andrew then became patron saint of Scotland in the middle of the 10th century when Angus II, King of the Picts, led an army of Picts and Scots against the English near Athelstaneford in East Lothian. So not too far from where our so East Lothian is sort of between Edinburgh and our headquarters here in the borders. So yeah, not too far from ScotlandShop HQ. And Angus declared that if he won the battle, he would appoint St Andrews patron saint of Scotland. And the story goes that on the morning of that battle, the clouds are said to have formed a white cross across the blue sky, and against all the odds, we won the battle, and that's how the design of the Saltire was born. So obviously
I didn't
coming,
know that.
yeah. So one, his crucifixion, and then two, this kind of cloud formation that then spurred Angus on and the Scottish Army to win that battle. So ever since we need to remember that. And I think it's quite funny because quite often you do look at the sky and you're like, oh, that looks a bit like a saltire. So you can kind of
Wow.
see where that came from. It doesn't seem like it would be too far fetched a story. So
Oh yeah, no, not at all. That's fully believable, and that's really cool because I just didn't know that.
yeah,
No, that's
there you
cool.
go.
So we celebrate St. Andrew's Day here in terms of like, we have a lot of St. Andrew's societies, and different Scottish societies. The New York Caledonian Club will have a St. Andrew's dinner. So that's what I'm familiar with. But I'm interested to know how St. Andrew's Day is celebrated in Scotland, because I'm sure it might be a bit different.
Well, actually, you probably do know quite well because the first St Andrews celebrations didn't actually take place here in Scotland, but instead were
Really?
celebrated in the US. Yeah, I know. I hadn't appreciated this either, so new to us both. But yeah, the story is that a group of wealthy Scottish immigrants living in Charleston, South Carolina, decided to get together and celebrate their Scottish roots, which makes total sense that, if you've just moved to a new country, you would want to meet up with people of a similar background. So,
Right.
yeah, they met up and they wanted to promote St Andrew's philanthropic ideals, which then they became famous in that area for their protection of widows and orphans. So the St Andrew Society of Charleston was first established in 1729 and is said to be the first St Andrew Society in all of North America. Um, so after they came together and formed their society and started this celebration, a lot of similar Scottish societies started becoming established across the US. And like you say, they still remain today. Um, and a lot of these dinners and celebrations actually have formed what is basically our patron saint day here. So it's obviously Scottish people that started the celebration, but just those who had moved away from their home country and wanted to come together to remember their Scottish heritage, really.
Yeah. That's well, that's really cool because it's I wouldn't have necessarily thought that it was something that originated in the United States, but it makes sense. And now, I mean, like you said, there's so many St. Andrews. I'm pretty sure that there's at least one St. Andrews Society in every state.
Oh, I would have thought.
Sometimes several. Like in New York, as we know, there are several. So that's just really, really cool. And it makes
Yeah,
sense that it originated in the Carolinas as well, because there were so many Scottish
yeah,
immigrants that came there. So no, that's really cool. So what do you guys eat then for your,
yeah,
or maybe I guess our mutual St.
yeah.
Andrew's Day?
Yeah, well, I've been speaking to everyone here in the office, and for all that it's the day that we celebrate our patron saint, it wasn't until 2007 that the Scottish Parliament granted Scotland the bank holiday to allow everyone to celebrate. And I would say because it's a relatively new holiday, not every company would necessarily shut to mark the holiday. But I know that all of the schools here, so all of the school children will be off. So I think when I was still at school, we probably would have marked it maybe with a special assembly or lunch at school. Whereas now, I don't know if they maybe do that a few days before or after, given that they're off on the day itself. So I think we wouldn't necessarily have a big formal dinner like you would for Thanksgiving, and I don't know that families would all come together. But I think we still are very conscious of it as a holiday and would then maybe think to go home and have a more Scottish traditional dinner. So again, there's no set meal that we would have in the same way that for Burns Night everyone will have haggis. At Hogmanay, a steak pie is quite popular. Um, Whereas St Andrew's Day, it's probably a bit more open to your own personal interpretation. But there will be people who will go home and have haggis or steak pie. Cullen Skink is a traditional Scottish soup, which I never thought I would like as a child, but I actually love it. It's great. So it's got fish and potatoes, so it's quite creamy and very warming and kind of just feels quite wholesome. So it's great for these colder months. And I think lamb's also quite popular. So basically any traditional Scottish food where you might not have that on a weekly basis here. If you were going to do it, I think St Andrew's Night, you're like, yeah, I'll pay homage to our traditions and go for that.
Yeah. Well, hearing about the traditional Scottish food, I was wondering then it's like we know that these are like traditional Scottish foods and we eat them at like Burns, and all of that. But like I know you just said that like you wouldn't necessarily have that stuff just like during the week, but in Scotland, do you ever just like decide like let me eat some haggis or like some Cullen
Yeah,
skink just like randomly for no reason?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So here in Scotland, it's in the supermarkets all year round. So
Really?
just last week, so I arrived back from the US Monday after being out with you. And so I arrived home in the afternoon, came to work for a few hours, went to the supermarket because I was like, if I go now, I won't fall asleep when I get home. And I got myself vegetarian haggis. So I don't really tend to eat meat. So for me, vegetarian haggis is what I love. But yeah, I just decided to have it for dinner that night and then kept some for lunch the next day. So and it's not like people would think that was a strange thing to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It seems very traditional, but I think it genuinely everyone likes it. So yeah, we do just go for it.
Well, and I guess it became traditional because people were eating it all the time
Exactly. Yeah. So
before at some point.
yeah. Like you
No,
say, I
that's
mean,
cool.
not every person or family might be like that, and I don't think you would have it on too regular a basis. But yeah, like you say,
Well, probably
definitely.
like things like lamb or like I know like salmon, things that are
Yeah.
we think of as like very connected to Scotland. I mean that's probably like more of the traditional kind of thing that you
Yeah.
might have just because the same way that like cheeseburgers are associated with our traditional American food, but we would have that all the time. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we have a
yeah,
lot of European influence here, so actually a lot of Italian food and yeah, all sorts of different foods have become the norm
yeah,
here in the UK. But like you say, those are our traditional dishes. So
yeah,
yeah, and then so like I say, there aren't necessarily big family dinners everywhere you go, but there are some big events held throughout Scotland. So in East Lothian, there's the Saltire Festival because obviously that's where we realised that the Saltire design comes from. And that festival celebrates St Andrew and the historical events. So there can be food and music and drink. While through in Glasgow, there's sometimes a torchlit procession which is held with all funds raised going to charity, again to kind of remember the generosity of St Andrew as our patron saint. So you can see how a lot of this kind of ties together. And then because it is obviously fall and moving into that winter time, then Oban Winter Festival is held in the north of Scotland. So that can include some whisky tastings, which we know everybody loves, and some comedy ceilidh dancing, some ice rinks, maybe a reindeer parade. So again, that's kind of, because that's a winter festival, it's maybe like you have your transition from Thanksgiving into Christmas. This is probably a bit of a similar festival, really.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds fun. Someday I'll make sure that I'm up there for all of these fun
Yeah.
St. Andrew's events. So if you were going to one of those events, or even if you were going to a formal dinner there or dinner here, what would you wear?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because, like you say, it really depends on how you are personally celebrating. And people will go to formal dinners here. Like we said earlier, there will be some St Andrews societies and Scottish societies here in Scotland, as well as maybe some more historical ones as well. So I think if you were going to a formal event, then a full kilt outfit is the most obvious way to go. And you can choose to wear your family tartan, linked to your clan, which makes total sense. Or if you don't have a clan of your own, or if you want to just honour St Andrew, you could go for the Earl of St Andrew's tartan, which is a nice blue and white design. So you can again see how that would be linked to the Saltire. So
Yeah.
I think if you're going to go for that formal outfit, then an 8-yard kilt is perfect with a Prince Charlie jacket, which is kind of the equivalent of a black tie. So we would probably refer to that as the tuxedo of kilt outfits. So yeah,
It's my
nice and
favorite. It's great.
so obviously that's if you're really going formal, but a good alternative if you wanted to introduce smaller accessories, or if you were heading straight to an event after work, maybe attending a virtual gathering, because nowadays there's a lot of hybrid events as we come out of COVID. So maybe a pair of cufflinks with your clan tartan or your clan crest, matching tie or pocket square would be good for a gent. And then you can just add these little Scottish tartan touches to your everyday outfit in honour of St Andrew. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to go so that you can be a bit more versatile in your day, whatever comes up. And
Yeah.
obviously, it's not just the men that can dress up. So for us ladies, then maybe a classic tartan dress would be a good option. So then you can wear it not just for St Andrew's Day, lots of other events too. And again, just like the men, you might want to choose a variation of your family tartan or go for the more kind of traditional route. So you might also look at the United States St Andrews tartan, which kind of honours all of the St Andrews societies that we mentioned. So yeah, again, quite open to your interpretation, really. But if you want to go to tradition for ladies, then a sash is a must. I think for any Burns night dinner or St Andrews dinner, you'll see a lot of sashes. So there are a few rules over which shoulder to wear your sash on. So do have a look at our guide on how to wear a sash. If you're not sure, best to get it right, because whether you're the lady, wife of the chief of your clan, then that would be a different rule to being just a member of the clan. So you don't want to upset anyone by getting that wrong. So, like I
So
say,
I
have a
wear
look at
mine on my right side, and Lorraine wears hers on her left side as the chief.
it.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, like I say, we've got our guide, so you can read the ins and outs and all the different rules to that. So I think Lorraine will be wearing it on the other one as chief of the Caledonian Club. Will be
Hmm.
what she's going for that. So
Yeah.
like I say, there's lots of ways, and to be honest, I don't think anyone's going to get too annoyed. But really, you want to show the tradition correctly, don't you?
Yeah.
And then a really good way to kind of finish that sash off is with a Celtic brooch. So that kind of helps hold your sash in place and adds a bit of sparkle and festive cheer to your outfit too.
Well, That sounds great. I definitely think that a tartan dress and a St. Andrew's tartan sounds like the perfect way to roll up to your St. Andrew's dinner.
Yeah.
That's great. So Emily, I know the answer to this, but I'm very excited about it. How are you celebrating St. Andrew's Day this year?
Well, yeah, so for me, this is going to be a first, but I'm actually going to be coming out to the States for St. Andrew's Day this year. So, yeah, just getting ready for that trip now. But with us opening the new store in Albany, last week had the chance to go and visit the St. Andrew Society in Albany. So they have what they call the rooms in downtown Albany, which are beautifully designed and have a lot of heritage there in the building itself. And so I was hearing all of the stories and got to meet the president and the historian of the society, which was great. And when we were setting up that, they said, "Well, will you be here on St. Andrew's Day?" I said, "Well, I think I'll go home in between, but yes, I can be here for St. Andrew's Day." So, yeah, they asked me to be their speaker at their St. Andrew's dinner on the 30th itself. So, here we're heading down the road to the Fort Orange Club, which is again in downtown Albany. Has a lot of history itself, that building. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to them about all things tartan and why we're coming to Albany and St Andrew's Day. So yeah, really looking forward to it and be a bit different. I think if I was at home though, um, some things we've been discussing here in the office about what we would do is maybe go to the pub for a drink. So quite a casual kind of, well, it's our patron saint day, so why not? You know us, we love whiskey or, a
Yeah,
nice
that
drink.
sounds I mean, what's more Scottish than going to the pub? So,
Exactly. So I think if I was here, I'd maybe be doing that. Amy in the marketing team said she might bring some iron brew with her lunch. So again, you might not have fizzy juice every day with your lunch, but our second national drink, then again, why not? Like we said earlier, maybe I would have had a Scottish dinner for tea. And what Tamara in the office said is, why not go and play some golf in St Andrews? So I think that's another great option if you are
yeah.
ever in Scotland. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a popular pastime anyway. So again, why not take the day off? Well, if you've got it off with the bank holiday, then yeah, a great way to celebrate. So yeah, I
Is
think
it
that's
not
just.
a little cold?
Well, yeah, you probably would maybe want an extra layer, but no, I think
So
I'm not sure.
are you guys golfing like into the winter in Scotland?
I have to be honest and say I don't really golf, so I'm probably not the best person to answer this question. But yeah, I mean there are local golf courses. So in Duns, just outside our headquarters, there is the local golf club, and yeah, as far as I'm aware, people will. I guess probably until the snow appears or ice.
Yeah.
I think that's probably all that would stop people. I'm sure they'll just have extra layers, maybe a wee hip flask to keep them warm, But other than that, I think, yeah, pretty much whenever they can get out onto the course, they'll be there.
I think I recall one year actually some people in my family going golfing on Thanksgiving,
Oh, there
if I
you go.
recall. Um, it's a very odd memory from like very long ago as a child. Like I recall some people going golfing because a lot of people golf in my family as well.
Okay.
But
Oh,
but in Scotland, that's very like, I just feel like it must be pretty cold and it's like, you're very dedicated to
oh
your
yeah. I think,
Scottish golf game.
oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, I think if you're into it, then yeah, most people will try and go pretty often. So
Yeah.
yeah, anytime that they can. And then if they've got the day off work, then what
Then
more of
why
a reason
not?
do you need? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's
Well,
been
that's
great to, yeah, go through everything and see where there's crossover between our Scottish and
yeah.
American celebrations. So wherever you are, especially if you're in America, then why not celebrate twice in the same week, I say.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
So you're
I
ready
certainly
to
will
go.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I already have my tartan on here.
Yeah.
So I'm
Wonder if
ready.
I would actually be out for Thanksgiving, but I basically fly out the weekend just after Thanksgiving, so
Yeah.
not
Well,
quite for this year,
next
but
year. Next
exactly.
year
Well,
we'll
now I
get you
know what
into
to
it.
expect. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, it
Well,
was
and
great to learn so much about St. Andrews
yeah. Well,
and
like I said,
basically realizing that America,
yeah, had a
you
lot to
know,
do with the
yeah,
celebration. So, yeah, our
yeah,
patron saint is now world renowned thanks to St Andrew's societies that
yeah,
have come from the States and gone all over. So
yeah, cool.
perfect. Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in. And if you've got any questions, then like we mentioned a few times, we've got lots of blogs you can go and read or ask us your questions, and we'll make sure to come back and answer them in a future episode too.
Yep. And happy Thanksgiving and happy St. Andrew's Day
Yes.
and happy, well, late Canadian Thanksgiving.
Exactly. And then next few weeks, everyone's going to be focused on Christmas, aren't they? So,
Yep, yep.
perfect.
Exciting.
Okay. Well, keep in touch. And yeah, like I say, just let us know if you've got any questions.